Welcome to Wild Places. I'm your host, Brad Clement. This podcast is presented by Panji Foundation, saving snow leopards, helping communities. If you're ready, I'm ready.
I'm ready. All right. Let's do
Will
it.
Croft, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you here. You know, we've known each other now for many, many, many years. And I think of all the life stories we could share, which is fantastic, that we walked away from the very first expedition that we met on, and we've left and continued a lifelong friendship. And I just love that. And I think about your resume of adventure. You know, you've been to the North Pole, the South Pole. You've climbed the 7 summits, the highest point on each of the 7 continents. You've also just spent 20 or 30 years climbing and loving adventure on many peaks other than just the 7 summits. Now, here's where I want to go with this right now is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you told me this story a long time ago, but here it is, this tremendous adventure resume. And what our audience may not know, and I think it's a super important factor to who you are. I think you were age 9. You were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I believe at that point, these doctors, physicians, experts told you your life expectancy, you're probably going to live until about 30 years old.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it was 1976. Really the dark ages of diabetes care. I came to diabetes really out of luck, which sounds odd, but when I was 2 or 3, my kidneys failed. And there was no solution. We found a physician who had smuggled himself out, I think Czechoslovakia at the time, and he recommended a high dose of steroids, which was effective in fixing my kidneys. But the result of that was, we think, led to diabetes. And so the choice, I suppose, at that time was, you know, your kidneys fail or your pancreas fails. We can help you if your pancreas fails. So that seemed like a better alternative. And really from age 9 on, when you're diagnosed with a potentially terminal or limiting condition, it generates a lot of anger and it generates a lot of doubt about your role in your life going forward. Even as a 9-year-old, you know, you have aspirations. Typically, you want to follow in your parents' footsteps or do something of that nature, things that you're exposed to. And all that was now on the table as a 9-year-old, and I didn't really know how to wrap my head around it. What I knew was I felt most comfortable, most satisfied when I was outside. And it didn't really matter what it was. I just had to be outside. And climbing seemed to be the thing that I was consistently good at, whether it was trees, fences, you know, all the typical things you climb as a kid. I couldn't really care about being a baseball player or a cricket player. I mean, at this time I'm living in England. So, you know, the idea of being a world-class football player was, you know, on the cards for most, but it certainly, I didn't really have that desire, but I wanted to be outside and I wanted to go up high. That's about what I knew.
Yeah.
And I think unknowingly at the time, you know, that allowed my emotional anxieties to sort of simmer rather than boil, which allowed me to then focus on, well, how do I manage this? Like, if I want to go on a trip, what do I need to do? How do I manage, for example, my diet with strange foods and having to know the carbohydrate content of everything? How do I manage blood testing? You know, in 1976, there was no blood testing. It was all urine testing. And any data that you got in terms of fluctuating sugars was 2 hours old at best. I mean, in 1976, I could not have climbed Everest just couldn't be done because we didn't know about blood testing, hemoglobin A1C, which is basically your blood sugar average over 6 to 9 weeks. We didn't know how bad or how good the long-term effects of diabetes were if you had really good management or really bad management. And it has come to pass where, the tighter your control, the longer you live, basically, and in most situations.
So I
So those are
remember,
things that I had to learn.
I remember filming you in the Himalaya, and here you are, we're at 26,000 feet, where some might argue those are fairly harsh environments anyway. And I remember you several times a day injecting yourself with various medications, full on syringe, needle. You had a
Yeah.
little monitor that was also stuck inside, I think through a
Yeah.
needle. It was like taped to you. So you could
Yeah.
measure, I guess it was blood sugar or whatever
Yeah.
it was. And you did it with grace and almost without any pause.
Right.
And it was hard enough for me to breathe and get on with the day, and you handled it so flawlessly. Now, is that something that just came maybe because since such an early age this was just your life, or what? I mean, did you consciously think, I need to fight this thing, I need to this is a battle, and I'm gonna do this?
I think a lot of those skills, the nonchalance that perhaps you saw, or the comfortableness with and flexibility that's required on an expedition, I think a lot of that comes through high school and college. I was a competitive swimmer. I wanted to swim fast. It was sort of the only sport that just completely exhausted me. And one of the things I love about an expedition is when you hit the sack at night, you are so toast, you don't even remember falling asleep. I love that feeling. And you feel productive, you feel engaged, you're participating in your life and someone else's. And I really just chased that simplicity, and swimming allowed me to do that. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I really enjoyed it. And I did that through high school and college. In those days, pretty much didn't tell anybody that I had diabetes. It was seen as, like a mark right on your forehead that said, treat me gently, which I didn't like, I suppose, from just a simple personal pride perspective. So I didn't tell anyone, and I functioned the best I could. There was, the odd disaster. I woke up in an ambulance going to the hospital because my blood sugar didn't come up one morning. That was a bit of a surprise, but it only happened once. And I was able to learn and to manage. So I could, a high blood sugar is needed for a particular type of very explosive activity, whereas a good blood sugar is needed for long sustained activity. And that's just, if you think about fuel in a car, it's very similar. And, swimming helped me sort of master that. It also helped me master just the downright onslaught of misery that can happen at high altitude, where you really got to like it. If you don't like it, you are going to suffer. And so really the solution is to enjoy the suffering, which is sort of a sick dichotomy. But I think as you're functioning in such a miasma or fog, that keeps you in tune with yourself. It keeps you generating and going in the right direction. And so I was able to put those together and slowly moved into rock climbing. I wasn't much good at that, but I really liked it. And then went from there to alpine. Alpine climbing, you got to move too fast. That's definitely out for me. I don't do that. One of the reasons I don't move fast is because of the way sugar is in my system is digested. I can go fast for a short amount of time, but I can't sustain fast for 12 hours, whereas I can sustain long and slow for 3 months, right? Say walking to the pole. So I had to find something that would allow me to be successful and use the skills, I suppose, a lot of which I had learned as a result of the diabetes, how to manage the detail, how to settle in with what's uncomfortable, how to pursue a goal regardless. And high altitude climbing was it. I mean, you and I met in 2004
Yeah.
on an Everest expedition that we were both gunning for. We felt so excited to be on our first major Himalayan expedition. I mean, it's the stuff you and I had read about, dreamed
Right.
about, and there we
Right.
were. And I didn't know how it was going to go.
Mhm.
I did not know how I was going to react above 8,000 meters. I'd only been to 7,000 meters before. So all of that was a learning curve. We weren't successful that first time.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Here's how I remember our summit day, and
Okay.
it's pretty. I mean, in retrospect, we can laugh about it. I remember we were both kind of devastated because we just thought we need to, and we certainly will summit Everest, and we didn't.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think it was what, maybe 3 in the morning, maybe 2 in the morning.
Okay.
We're at about 27,000 feet.
Okay.
And, we were pretty much by ourselves. We had Panuru with us, and that
Yes.
was it. It wasn't crowded like it is now. And we were
No.
hanging
Right.
ourselves out there. We were the only ones kind of right there at that time,
Yeah. It
in
was
the
kind of
dark,
cool.
cold, just the three of us. And remember, neither one of us could breathe, and we didn't know why. And we were talking about it a little bit, but not, not expounding on the discomfort, because we just, one,
Can't
it was a new
talk.
experience for both of us. We'd never been hooked into oxygen systems like that.
Right. Right.
And we knew it was going to be just a pain in the ass to get to the summit. And at
Yeah.
one point, I remember we sat down, you're like, I can't breathe. I'm not even sure I can see that well. And I can't breathe either. And we realized our oxygen system had failed. It was not working.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we made the good call. We made the safe call that keeps us
We
here
did.
today, able to be speaking to one another and to continue our life. We
Yeah.
turned around, and I remember really being quite upset at the
Sure.
time, but it was a great learning lesson, and of course we've moved on from that and done other things. But at the time, I was so upset. Now looking back, so many years in retrospect, hindsight being 2020, I also see your ability to handle, like, yeah, that this isn't working, I need to manage this. That goes
Right.
back to your life for so many years before that.
Right.
What was your first big high altitude expedition?
High altitude. That would be Aconcagua in '95, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, so
Um,
so for our audience, it's about a 23,000-foot mountain, just under 23,000 feet. It's noted as the highest peak outside of Asia in the world. It's a very high mountain. South America, highest point in the southern and western hemispheres. It's a big dude. It's dry and windy and nasty,
rock and dust is what it
and
is.
it's super cold, but
Yeah,
it's absolute high altitude.
for sure. I did. I went to Aconcagua in '95. I didn't know if I could make it. I had no
Mhm.
idea. I just knew I wanted to try. And, it was one of those opportunities. Had a friend who was a guide. He had a company, he had a spot, the price was right. I had a real job at the time, and I thought, it's sort of now or never. The boss at work was perfectly reasonable. Gave me a month to go and try it, and I made it. It was not easy. That was probably the hardest summit day I'd ever done, just
Hmm.
because I didn't know. As I look back on it now and my numbers in my notebooks and things like that, I can see that I ran an extraordinarily high blood sugar because I was afraid that I would go drastically low and just pass out from low and then continue to pass out because of lack of oxygen. So I ran a very rich blood sugar, which is exhausting. You know, if you imagine in your blood system, which are your fuel lines, now choking those up with glucose or with dirt, your engine just is not going to run efficiently. It's going to run, but it's going to sort of choke along. And I knew that, and I did sort of choke along, but I had to find a better way. I was successful, but it had no longevity. Like if that was my one shot, great, done it, don't need to do it again. But I loved it. I just thought, wow, this is, and the sick part is, it's like, wow, this is miserable, but this is awesome. And so I wanted to master it. And the only way to do that was to continue to climb. Obviously couldn't do big expeditions all the time, but if I could master my blood sugars and what stress did to it, and that's probably the biggest thing I learned is, you know, the way stress affects your blood sugar at sea level is very similar at altitude. It's just stress. Your system is overwhelmed. So if I could manage my stress at sea level and apply those lessons as I went up, I would have a higher chance of success. I still didn't know if I could do it, but I felt like I was putting the tools in the box so that I had a reasonable chance of success. It's the same thing with the South Pole. Man, I had no idea if I could walk to the South Pole. And there were some very simple questions that sponsors would ask. They're like, well, what do you do if your insulin freezes? Insulin cannot freeze. It's my life's blood. I depend on it. If it freezes, I will die. That's a very easy situation. That is not inspiration for a financial sponsorship, right?
And what are the temperatures? What are the temperatures going into the South Pole? And how many days were you there dealing with those temperatures?
Right. So I was on Antarctica for about 90 days, 60 days of which were walking, 2 weeks at either end, you're waiting for flights, just the nature of the winds and so on. But there were challenges, you know, what if your insulin freezes? So I had to be able to answer that and give a firm answer that I needed to give evidence. I didn't have any. So that was one problem. The second problem was, we know Antarctica is cold. It's a long way from rescue. What if just something minor happens? You could be a week from rescue. Can you make it? I didn't know. It had never been done before. Then physicians would ask, or sponsors would ask, we know that your eyesight is particularly challenged because of diabetes, retinopathy. Again, the blood glucose breaks down the retina. Diabetics have a high chance of going blind. There's more blue light in Antarctica and in the North Pole too. So the thought was that blue light, I might be more likely to go blind or have sight damage. Another question was fingers and toes. We know that diabetic patients, there are amputations. You know, people lose fingers and toes. It's not uncommon to hear stories of grandparents losing legs. Not the way they used to in the 70s, but certainly it was in everyone's mind. You know, if I get a little touch of frostbite, am I going to lose the finger? Well, I didn't really care about a finger, but I needed to be able to answer that question to people who are executives making the decisions. So those things alone, and then another overriding issue was just the simple endurance. We know that the diabetic system physiology is slower to recover. Coughs and colds take, you know, maybe a week or two instead of 3 or 4 days to recover. A simple cut may take a day or two longer than somebody else. Not a big deal, but relevant when you're in that environment. I needed to put together a package where I could answer those questions and still ask for a lot of money to do a trip that I didn't know if I could do or not, but I knew I wanted to try it. It was just a very simple, romantic idea of a difficult, hard expedition that I had no idea if I could get away with it or not. And I just thought that was the coolest thing.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Well, is is there a memory throughout the years you were basically a full-time adventurer? And you've done the Adventure Grand Slam. You spent so many years, day in, day out, in tents, in inhospitable conditions. Were there any moments where you forgot about how uncomfortable it was, or what you had to do to manage yourself and the environment around you, and you just looked up and thought how beautiful nature was? I mean, are there still moments like that for you? Or are you
Oh, for
still
sure.
that kid climbing a tree that just
Oh,
fell in love with
yeah.
nature?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I remember a day on Manaslu years ago, and I just, just brought tears to my eyes. I was way out on some glacier on my own. I don't know if I was even going up. I was probably going up, and big load, beautiful day, no one around, and it just brought tears to my eyes. I had music. I mean, the music was right, the scene was right. Yeah, that was it. I just thought, I love this. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Same on
yeah.
Everest. I mean, there are a couple spots in Everest. There's this one place. Well, there are two places I really like. One is when you come down from the south summit, there's this long, long ridge that goes down to the balcony, and you can see the balcony below you, and you can see these people coming up, and there's oxygen there, and the sun has come up, and you're looking into Tibet, and it's like your life is on the line right there. That place I love, and I've been fortunate to be there twice. And then the other place is right above the Geneva Spur. You remember this, right?
Yeah.
So right above the Geneva Spur, once you take off your rope and you unclip so that others can come up or go down, if you move just off to the right, there's like this little bowl where you can sit and watch people coming up from Camp 3. And that place is very special. I just think it's spectacular.
That's cool. That's cool. And of
That's
course,
where I think you have a video of it actually, and there are birds flying under us. So yeah, it's good.
yeah. And above that bowl is nothing but down sloping shale that, that you
Oh,
have no security on.
none.
And you can't breathe, you can't see out of your goggles. Yeah, it's a
Nasty.
pretty
It's just
exhilarating
nasty.
place.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, so do you think being told at a young age that your life expectancy is quite limited, you think that drove you harder, or do you think you just got on with it? I know your dad is a British Air Force pilot. I've met him. He's fantastic, and he's that typical British understated badass
Right.
who just gets on with it. Where do
Correct.
you think your personality came from? Was it just your upbringing as a kid with parents as they were, or do you think diabetes played into being told at such a young age you're not going to live very long, that you said, no, I think I am going to live?
Yeah, I think it's some of all of the above. Growing up in England on Air Force bases, you grow up with a certain discipline and expectation that is common. You don't break the rules. You do as you're told. You are seen and not heard. It's sort of that's how I grew up. I also grew up with, figure it out and get on with it. That's very British, and that's, you're going to whine about it or do something about it. Those are sort of what I grew up with. I did, however, I did grow up with a sense that my time was limited. And I did grow up with the sense that, um, I could lose a limb or my sight or whatever disaster. I did. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized that, well, it wasn't until I was older that I could put that into words.
Hmm.
And before I could put it into words and frame it so it looked right in my head, it just generated just rage that drove anyone who knew me could say, yeah, he's got some anger. He can really nail you if he's annoyed, which I'm not proud of at all. There's no way to treat people or to be. But as I got older, as one does, you can wrap your head around what you are and manage it. And that kind of mix between don't whine about it and get on with it and limiting time drove me to the big expeditions, because I thought, if I can't do them in my 20s and 30s, I'm just not sure that I'm certainly not going to sit in a classroom in my 20s and 30s. That was going to eat me alive. So I figure I may as well get out and do what I want to do while I still can. But I did have a backup plan. At this point, I was having children. So,
Yeah.
Couldn't live out of a truck for the rest of my life,
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the rage. I know you ever since we've met. I know you as one of the most calm, methodical,
Oh, yeah.
positive people.
Good.
And so it's interesting to see that evolution for you. Once you could almost interpret your own life as an adult or as a young adult,
Yeah,
and
right.
convert that rage into maybe some passion and direction, almost, it sounds like.
Right. People talk about passion, and I think of it more as like just irritability. I just want to go, And I think people who do big trips, at first, I don't think we do understand it, but we know we've got to go. And people who know us know that we're nicer to be around when we can go. And yeah, I mean, all of that took a while, as it should. I think it gives it value, when you have time to reflect on something and expand on those thoughts and get rid of the bad ones and focus on the good ones. Yeah, that's the ideal version. But at some point you have to settle with the parts of you that you don't like. And I did not like that anger, and that I liked the drive that it gave me, but I didn't like the way I conducted myself at sea level. So I was sort of saving myself and saving others by going away, but that's not a long-term solution. I needed to figure that out. And big expeditions and successful sponsorships allowed me to do that. So I feel fortunate that I had the time to do that, for sure.
What's the best or most profound expedition experience? Does something come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, probably a big one was when I was about 17. I went to South America for 3 months. I took a year off after high school. I had no desire to go to college at all. And I applied for an expedition that was run by Prince Charles. And the idea was to go to Patagonia for 3 months and work with international kids, I think 17 to 24, and do a month of hardcore expedition, a month of scientific research, and a month of public service. And the idea of going to Patagonia was just this picture in my head. I wasn't really sure what it was, but wow, that sounded cool. I want to go there. Well, I got the application from Operation Raleigh, and it said, if you have diabetes or epilepsy, we can't even consider you. Like, don't apply because you're just not even on the sheet. That pissed me off. And, that was a very definite moment where my parents said to me, are you going to whine about it, or are you going to do something about it? And to be told that by your parents was really annoying, but it forced me to answer the question. I wrote a letter to Prince Charles. I got a response. I said, I can do this. Here's why. I got the opportunity to go. I went on the expedition. It was by far the best building block of my time. Yeah, it was excellent. It was a disaster, but it was excellent.
What's the worst expedition you've ever been on?
Oh, that one too. I'll tell you. Here's why. Here's why.
That is fantastic, and that is so real. That is how it happens. Like, on expeditions, the best and the worst can be the same minute, the same experience.
Oh, for sure. It's like marriage, I'm sure. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's here's why it was bad. It was bad because I had made all this effort to be on the expedition. I had royal approval. And there I was, and we discover on the expedition that we're out of food. Somebody mismanaged the food. We are in open boats. We're going down the coast of Chile. Our job was to follow migration paths of, I don't know, some bird or some animal. We're out of food. We've got 21 days to go. So for 21 days, we live off the land. And I mean, we boil bark, we hunt seaweed, we eat shrubs, we kill ducks. That's all we had. The main rations were a slice of bread, a slab of cheese, and that was about it for the day.
Now, does bark taste like I would assume it does?
Oh yeah, it tastes like bark. But listen, this is a real problem when you have to manage your blood sugar and your insulin. Okay. I had no idea how to dose insulin for bark and seaweed. I had no idea what to do if we couldn't eat, which there were a number of days where there was no food. So I lost a lot of weight, like a lot of people did, but I really had a problem. And I think the way I solved it was a lot of the motivation at that point was just pride. Like I'm going to figure this out. I do not know how. I don't know if I'll be successful, but I have to figure this out because Prince Charles gave me permission to be here. That is really bad if I get this wrong. So I was on like 2 units of insulin per day.
And
as a comparison, today I would be on about 40 units.
Oh, wow.
The amount of insulin you have is generally based on your weight and activity. So at that point, I was on 2 units a day. I would only take the insulin if I physically had the food in front of me. I mean, it worked in the sense that I survived it. I enjoyed it. I learned from it. I went on. But in the moment, I mean, that was pretty terrifying. Mm-hmm. And I was still in a position really where I wasn't talking to other people about my health because I didn't want to make a big deal of it. I didn't want to burden those that I was with. I mean, they're starving. I don't need them starving and worrying about something else. So I'm starving.
There's some mental and emotional isolation going on as well beyond
for sure.
The physical hardships.
And I think probably if you look at it, a lot of that is self-protective. Mm-hmm. You know, like I don't know, so I don't want to put it out there. And that was the learning process. Now, having gotten away with it, I value that learning process. But yeah, at the time it was pretty lonely.
So what's next for you?
Well, not climbing for sure. So I'm not climbing anymore. Long backpacking trips are really what I'm enjoying. You know, I like going out on the trail for a couple weeks and, you know, just living off the trail with a heavy pack.
Is there a point where after this long career of extreme adventure where you're not as young as you used to be, which I don't say that negatively. I say that in a positive fashion because I think as we get older, we become a little more comfortable with who we are. Sure. Is there a point where you said it's okay to stop the level at which I'm enduring these adventures and just enjoy the core of what I always enjoyed?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that time is now. Certainly with the kids getting older, you know, I've got 5 kids, all of whom are healthy, doing well. I enjoy spending time with them. We enjoy outdoors. We enjoy going camping. So I think about now. Yeah, now's good.
That's great. That's great. Will, I can't thank you enough. It's always fantastic to catch up.
Brad, it's so good to see you. I haven't heard from you in ages. It's great. I love it.
Well, good. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. And again, just wish you all the best. I think you're a fantastic inspiration, not just because of type 1 diabetes or diabetes. I think you're an inspiration for facing a challenge, exploring the wild places on Earth, and moving forward with it through the hurdles. So
thanks, Brad. It's been good. It's been good talking to you.
Cool. Take care, Will.
Take care. We'll see you.